Hey, what's up people, it's TTC. We're hanging out in the kitchen today because we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. The kids were all in school, my wife was busy, and I was just sat there bored as hell. I could see the ATT sat on top of my bookshelf, and I just thought to myself, you know, impulsive. I'm going to get that thing down and I'm going to weather it up. I had no real plans prior to this to do this, but you know, sometimes when I'm bored, I just need a project to keep me busy. So this video might end up being just a little bit rough and ready, but hopefully still interesting to watch. I bought this walker probably about a year ago and I was so excited because I'd wanted one of these for so damn long, and I found it on eBay as it is, and I think it had 4 clone troopers with it for, I think it was about 75 quid. So yeah, I was pretty damn happy with that. But obviously it's not in perfect condition. It's missing all the little missiles from the front and the back. The cannon on the top is missing, and then some of that clear plastic bit has actually got a bit of a crack in it too. And last time I checked, none of the electrics were working. So no pew pew sounds, unfortunately. Nothing's actually broken though, and it's still a damn good looking piece. The only problem is that Hasbro just did it in this sort of flat grey plastic, which I don't actually hate, but it is kind of, you know, just a little bit plain. It could do with some kind of weathering. There's no problems with any of the opening bits on this, you know, the door's still open fine, all the hinges still work. I actually really like this feature as well. It might not be completely accurate to anything, but it's pretty cool to have somewhere to actually put your clone troopers inside. And the opening part, the little ramp on the back, still works totally fine, although one of the sides does tend to stick just a little bit. Nothing too serious though. And then as you can see inside, it is missing the little handrails that are supposed to be in there, and then a couple of the stickers are also peeled off, and I got this too. Basically what I'm saying is, I'm happy enough with the condition of this to keep it, but with the issues that it has, I've got absolutely no problem diving in and painting this thing up and probably ruining it. So the only real plan that I had for this thing was I wanted to keep it fairly subtle. I definitely want to dirty it up and make it look like it's seen some kind of action, but I don't want it to be absolutely filthy, coated in grime, loads of burn marks or sand or dust or mud or whatever. I just want to keep it not too heavy-handed, sort of like it's had lots of layers of crap build up on it over time and then sort of fall off and build up again. That kind of naturally dirty kind of look, rather than just covering it in a shitload of paint. First things first, get rid of these clones. And this here is my tub of painting supplies. It is an absolute mess, as you can see, but at the same time, you know, so what? It really doesn't need to be tidy. Loads of different kind of acrylic paints and brushes and pens, and for some reason, a couple of loose drawing pins. Got a couple of these Draw Ease paint markers. I stand by these are so good. So for this one, I'm going to be using some black, and I always have a massive tube of black because it runs out so fast. A little bit of burnt sienna or any kind of sort of reddish brown colour. A little bit of soft beige, which kind of looks white on the camera. It's not though, it's definitely got a bit more of a creamy tint to it. Just a little bit of a foresty green colour. And then I used this silver paint marker to add scrapes and scratches and dings and stuff like that. And of course I dug out my super ancient paint palette here. I've had this thing for so long. I'd actually just recently scraped all the like 30 layers of dried paint off there. I kind of wish I'd waited and done it on camera because it was so satisfying. And then the idea is to just take a little splodge of each colour and then just mix them together. But mix them kind of lazy. You don't want it perfectly mixed together. You want kind of little, maybe accidental streaks of each colour. Kind of just helps with the dirtiness and the randomness of it. Just keep going really until I get a sort of a greyish brown kind of, well, dirty colour. And then for this stage, just mix in an absolute crap load of water. You want it quite thin, quite runny. You know, you can see it pouring down the palette there. And then this is the fun, easy part. You know, I just slathered that crap all over this thing. Starting at the feet, because obviously they'd be the dirtiest part with them standing directly on the ground. And then what I like to do here is after you've let it sort of dry for maybe a minute or so, is dab it with some tissue, rather than wiping it off completely. If you wipe it, you know, you'll get it in all the recesses and whatever. But if you dab it like this, you also get the odd sort of little discoloured, just like little areas where it sort of builds up slightly more than other places, and it really helps add that kind of dirtier, sort of textured look. And yeah, I went through an absolute ton of tissue making this. But it's worth it because you can kind of see there already that it's added sort of like a mottled kind of look to it. And then obviously the next job after that was to just completely go over the whole rest of this thing with that. Just making sure to follow it around with the tissue and dab it off before it completely dries on. And anywhere like this, where it's too little to get a tissue right down in there, I just use the end of a cotton bud and, you know, just keep dabbing away. So admittedly, this first stage is quite subtle, but if you compare it to the other side, you can definitely see that is completely clean grey. There's definitely a visible difference with the side that we've done. I really like how this adds just a little bit of pretty subtle realism. And whilst I was filming, the postman turned up with this. In my last video, I mentioned that I was hunting for 501st and 212 clones to put in my Clone Wars collection, and I managed to find this guy for dirt cheap on eBay. Definitely still looking for more, specifically the animated clones, but this guy will look really cool in this walker when it's done. So here's the whole thing done in just that first coat, and I actually really like how this looks, you know, I mean, it just adds sort of like a dirty, gritty, real world kind of texture. On any other day, I'd actually probably be happy to just leave it like this. You know, do this on any other kind of grey vehicle like an ATST or whatever, and I think it just helps it pop. But we're not finished yet. Those feet in particular definitely need to be way more dirty. This is just the same paint mixture as before, but with a little bit more brown and then a little bit less water just to make it a bit thicker. So when you dab it off like this, it actually leaves more behind. Gives it more of a stained kind of look. Same mixture again, but with a bit more green added this time, and I'm sort of just trying to add in places where I think there'd be a bit more sort of thicker, more built on, crustier kind of dirt. And then again, I'm just dabbing around the edges with a cotton bud just to sort of smooth it in a little bit more. I really don't like the look of just loads of paint stuck on something. I want it to kind of look more like this is the colour of the plastic. It is definitely a bit of a slow process of just building up layer after layer, but it is starting to take shape. At this point, I'm just adding more watery, darker paint so that it'll run down to the bottom of the feet, and then using this little tiny brush to just add a little bit more water to help it run downwards. In any places like this where there's too much water building up, I'm just using the end of a cotton bud just to soak it up a little bit. In here, I'm just doing basically the same thing, dotting a bit of watery black paint in random places, then an extra blob of water and just let it run wherever it naturally runs, and you get sort of a nice dirty, kind of greasy oil stain kind of effect. This is the fun kind of painting because you've really got no control over it. Just add a bit of water and, you know, let it go wherever it goes, and 90% of the time it's going to look pretty good. And if it doesn't, you know, just wipe it off and start again. And now I'm just loading the brush up with quite a dark brown colour and then wiping most of the excess off to create a nice dry brush effect. And you just sort of drag it quick and light along the edges, and you get a nice sort of wispy, sort of carbon scoring, scratchy marks kind of effect. And then I'm just doing basically the same thing with that silver paint marker. You just add a big blob of paint on the edge and then drag it with your finger. You get these pretty cool sort of metallic looking scratches. You can do the same thing with just like a silver dry brush, but I don't currently have any silver paint, so I'm just working with what I've got. Again, just building up more and more dirt around the feet, going thicker and darker each time. Here I'm just sort of trying to add it into all the creases and all the bits where dirt would naturally get stuck. All this dabbing can get a little bit repetitive and tedious. I had to watch a couple of episodes of The Simpsons whilst I was doing this just to stop myself from going insane. I'm just going up the legs here with sort of a rustier, more brown colour, getting right in between all the details of all the little knobs and screws or whatever you want to call it, and then making sure just to dab it all out again. Just absolutely rinsing through these cotton buds. Again, the same kind of rusty, dirty brown colour, and I'm just getting in between all the little gaps and creases around sort of the metal rings and all the obvious detail places where dirt and grime would naturally build up and accumulate. Here I'm mixing some very, very dark brown with a little bit of that beige colour as well, and then adding tons and tons of water again. I want this very runny and sloppy, and then I'm just randomly flicking and splattering it all over the feet. This is supposed to represent more of like a top layer of more wet, splattered around, sort of mud kind of dirt. Just keeping it pretty watery so it don't go on too heavy. In any places where it did, you just add a little bit more water and help it run off. It's pretty simple. Can't really get this wrong. Again, just getting between all those creases, between the metal parts with the dirty, rustier colour. It's not only for realism and just making things look dirtier, obviously, but it also kind of adds a little bit of depth. Dab, 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 dab. Back in with the silver again, just adding a few more dings and scratches, but this time leaving a little bit more of the paint behind. Adds to the illusion that they've been added a little bit more fresh than some of the others. So by this point, it's really starting to take shape. You could probably actually call this finished if you really wanted to, but I have one more stage that I like to do when I do stuff like this, and I don't think everybody would call it necessary, and it's probably something I can get a little bit anal with, but I definitely think this last little touch just really helps bring things to life. Just taking a normal pencil rubber, or an eraser for you Americans. This is literally just a crap one that came out of my son's pencil case. So I found that once acrylic paint is completely dry, the rubber is really good at just removing sort of like the top layer. So if you hit up anywhere where there would be sort of highlights or sort of like a top side of the walker, then you can actually get a really nice contrast between the different layers of dirt. Again, it's very subtle, but if you look at the difference between the left and the right of this panel in the middle, you can definitely see that a lot of it has started to come away. So if you keep that up, you end up with something that I actually think is quite interesting. Just improves the overall look, I think. Again, I'm trying really hard to go for subtle here. It definitely helps to go in the direction of movement, so it kind of looks like wind or friction or anything like that has kind of rubbed off some of the top layer of dirt. Again, just sort of adding to the realism. Oh, these little rolled up flaky bits of rubber can be bloody annoying though. I'm just trying to focus on the hinges or knees, if you want to call them that, of the walker where the dirt would have built up and then probably scraped off as they're walking. So you get these sort of natural high spots where it's kind of cleaned off a little bit. I actually think I did a pretty good job of this right here around the edge of the foot. It's a pretty good example of that. This is also really good for removing any sort of paint scuffs that have come off other toys or other figures, you know, banging against the plastic. I hate that. If you take a rubber like this though, you give it a really, really good scrub. It might take a while and quite a little bit of rubbing, but eventually it will come off. And then lastly, it was just a case of wiping the whole thing down with another wet wipe. Kind of gets rid of any of the little furry, you know, sticky bits of tissue that might have got stuck to it. Removes any kind of excess paint that you don't really want. Kind of just cleans the whole thing up again. Gives it that new car smell. And that is where I decided to call it a day. Might not all completely show up on camera, but if you compare it to the sort of flat grey that it was originally, I definitely think this looks tons better. There is a small part of me that kind of misses that now because I'm an idiot, but I'm definitely happy with how this turned out. When you're dirtying or weathering anything up like this, you could definitely just keep going for days, adding more and more, and then removing some and adding some and back and forth. You got to kind of try and pick a state that you're happy for it to be in, and I've definitely reached it here. Like I said at the start, I didn't want it absolutely filthy or completely battle damaged. I just wanted to age it up, make it look like it's been used, it's seen some kind of action. You know, make it more fit in with that sort of used aesthetic that everything in the Star Wars universe has. And I think, or I hope at least, I've achieved that here. It's definitely looking more aged and worn, and I think I've managed to just toe the line before it just looks like someone has chucked a load of paint on a toy. I think this is just about right in my opinion. Like I said, you can definitely always keep adding more, and there was a small part of me that was tempted to make an absolutely trashed walker. But nope, I'm glad I stopped when I did. And you know, if I really feel like it, I can always come back and... Nope, I'm not going to say I'm coming back and adding more. I'm happy with this. Let's stick to my guns. This is it now. Finished. It was definitely worth getting in trouble for making a massive mess in the kitchen and using all the cotton buds and all the toilet roll. I don't care. I'm always in trouble for something anyway. That's what being a husband is. You know, if you're not getting shouted at, you're doing it wrong. Sometimes, you know, some messes are just worth making. So don't forget to like this video, drop us a comment down below, let us know what you think. Should I have carried on, made it even more dirty? Have I gone too far and completely ruined this? And make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Plenty more stuff coming soon, including I kind of have some kind of plan about 3D printing a new cannon for this thing, so fingers crossed, let's see how that goes. You might end up seeing it here soon. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers!